So now that your slipper is looking like this, we are now going to form the back part of the heel of the slipper. So with the right side facing yourself, you're going to want to cast on or pick up, you're going to want to pick up 14 stitches along this back here. Now what I always do, I always pick up a stitch in this line and a stitch in that line and then 12 along the bottom. That's how I've always done it. That's why it's 14. So you want to pick up your 14 stitches. Little side note, when you're picking up your 14 stitches, once again, leave a long piece of yarn instead of a short one, because you can use that length of yarn to sew up the seam on the back of the slipper then when you're ready to do it. So now you just want to knit 4 across evenly for 4 rows. All right. So now we have our 4 rows that we are doing for our heel. See how nice and pretty that is? Ta-da! So now what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to make that heel flap look like the shape of a triangle. So to do that, you knit 2 together on each end. So to start the next row, the 5th row, we're going to knit 2 together, knit every stitch down to the last 2 stitches, and then we're going to knit those 2 stitches together. Right. Then we're going to knit 2 rows on those 12 stitches that we have. For the rest of making the heel, you're going to want to knit 2 stitches together at the beginning of the row, knit all of the stitches down to the last 2 stitches, and you're going to knit those 2 stitches together. And then you're going to knit 2 rows. So when you get down to the last 4 stitches, all you're going to do is knit the last 2 stitches together twice. So you're going to knit 2 together and knit 2 together. And then you're going to knit across twice. Alright, now we're getting to the part where I know a lot of people start to think, oh geez, I don't know if I can do this. Oh yes, you can. Knitting in the round is not nearly as hard as people think it is. It really isn't. You just don't flip the work back and forth, that's all. So what you're going to do now is you're going to take your double pointed needle, one of your size 5 double pointed needles that you have, same size as the needles that you were using before, and you're just going to slip those 2 stitches off onto your double pointed needle. Remember when we did the decrease when we were making the slipper, when we went down from 3 stitches on the edge to the 2 stitches on the edge? What we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to pick up 17 stitches from the end to that little ball. You're going to feel it with your fingers there where you actually decreased. Even when you look at it, you're going to be able to see it, but you're going to feel it mostly. You're going to want to evenly space 17 stitches along there. It's pretty much standard practice to say evenly spaced. Sometimes you're going to pick up a stitch in every stitch, or you're going to pick up a stitch in every other stitch. It's kind of a weird sort of combination. As long as you get your 17 stitches fairly even, that's probably the best that you're going to do. That's just what it is. It's knitting. Once again, knitting isn't an exact science. It's a lot of almosts and just abouts and close enoughs. And it still works out quite well. So now that we transferred those 2 stitches onto this needle, we're going to get another double pointed needle. Just trying to find my needles there. And you're going to knit those 2 stitches. So you just knit them like you would any other thing that you have ever knitted. Okay. So you want to pick up a stitch right on the edge as close as you can and knit and pick up a stitch. And you're going to keep going down the length of your slipper. And don't worry if you're not exactly right on that little knob bump part. It doesn't really matter because that is the toe part. You're going to sew that all together when you're putting your slipper together. Now some people find that this gets a little bit tricky. We're going to now pick up stitches along the other side of the slipper. Run your finger down the length of your slipper and you're going to feel that little knob again. And that's where you're going to want to start picking up your next stitches. Oops, see, even I kind of screwed up sometimes. All right, so that, and you're going to want to pull it fairly tight, snug, not like super tight, but just snug. So we have 1, 2 stitches. So that is all of your 36 stitches that you've picked up. Ooh, looks like quite impressive knitting, doesn't it? I would also recommend that you count all the number of stitches that are on all of your needles for a total number of stitches, just so you have 36 stitches. If you have more than 36, the knit 2 purl 2 pattern isn't going to work. So whatever number of stitches you have around your cuff, it has to be divisible by 4. So the hard part in knitting with double pointed needles and knitting in the round sometimes can be starting your next row when you first picked up stitches. So you want to just knit it like you would any other stitch. So you knit it, and you want to, once again, make that stitch fairly snug so it's going to pull itself together with that last picked up stitch that you made before. That way you're not going to have a gap in your knitting when you start the cuff of the pattern. So we're going to knit 2, purl 2 all the way around. And you do it just like you would any other knitting. You're just going to slide it off and it's going to work perfectly well. It's pretty cool how that works. And when you get down to your last stitch, you just knit and you drop it, and then that's the needle that you're going to use to start knitting on your next needle. So you just keep knitting like you would any other time. So you start knitting and purling, knitting 2 and purling 2, just like you would if you were working on regular needles. Okay, and then you do your next stitches. And once again, you drop that one off your needle. And then there's your needle for the next go. And you use that needle to knit the rest of the stitches off the next needle. So that was your very first go around of circular knitting. You can knit on double pointed needles. Told you it was easy. Okay, so we are going to want to knit a total of 10 rows of the knit 2 purl 2 around for the cuff of the slipper. If you want a slipper that has a longer cuff, you can easily do that. All you need to do is keep doing the knit 2s and purl 2s around for the length that you actually want. I know some people actually like a taller cuff to fit more like a sock, more further up their leg. I've actually made pairs of slippers for people who want to sleep in them, and they requested that the cuff be anywhere from 4 to 6 inches long to go up their leg, so the slippers will stay on when they're sleeping. Always an idea. Everything is always changeable. It's kind of neat how that works. Knitting is very good and customizable, and you can do really pretty much whatever you want. So keep knitting in the round, knit 2, purl 2, until you get it the length that you want. In the pattern, I say 10 rows, but if you want more, you can do that. If you want less, you can do that too. Well, I'm not sure if this is lazy or what exactly this is. This might be a part lazy, might just be because I've decided that that's what I want, in a shorter cuff. So what I've now done is, I think I've done maybe 3 rows. I don't want a particularly long cuff on my slipper that I'm making, so I decided that I'm going to do short, and I'm even going to do less than 10 rows. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to knit around, and what that's going to do is it's going to cause the cuff to get a nice edge on it. That's a nice rounded edge that's automatically going to curl underneath of itself. All right, so we are almost finished. All we have to do now is cast off the edge for our cuff. Cast off. One of the things that you need to remember when you're making slippers with cuffs, you want to cast off loosely. You want to be able to stretch that cuff enough that it's easily going to go around the foot, especially around the part of the foot that is the heel and the top of the foot where your foot meets your leg. That is the widest part of your foot, and you need to keep your slipper so it's going to be able to stretch around that. I can't stress enough how important it is to cast off loosely when you are making a cuff. And when I mean loose, I mean you make your loops when you're casting off ridiculously large. Really. If you look at them and you're like, that looks too big, that's how big it needs to be. You want to make sure that they're good and loose, so the natural elasticity that is created through making a ribbed pattern is going to be maintained. So it stretches big enough so it needs to get around the widest part, but still hugs when it needs to. So it will still hug around the ankle of somebody's leg. So when you're casting off with double pointed needles, it's exactly how you cast off any other time when you are knitting. Okay, so keep casting off till you're all done. Well, hello, Sir Meow's lot. If he didn't make an appearance, it would be wrong. You know that, right? You miss him. You would miss him. If he didn't somehow become involved in a video, we'd all be shocked and a little surprised. So we are now done casting off. And break your thread, or your yarn I should say, pull it through, pull it tight,